Okay, well, hello everybody, and welcome to another presentation of the online ColdFusion Meetup. I'm Charlie Earhart, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. And in this edition of the Meetup, our 249th, and the first one this year, we're working on getting more presenters. Anybody who wants to present, come on, let me know. Anyway, in this session, being recorded on Thursday, May 11th, 2017 at noon U.S. Eastern Time, we've got Pete Lombardo, who's going to be talking on AWS, Amazon Web Services, for CF developers, the low-hanging fruit, as he calls it. So thanks, Pete, for coming on. And with that, I'll stop sharing, and you can take over.
All right, thanks, Charlie. And we'll see what I can do here. There we go.
There it is. Looks good. Take it away.
Very good. Thanks again, Charlie. Thank you all for coming. Good morning. My name is Peter Lombardo. Today we're here to discuss Amazon Web Services as they might pertain to ColdFusion developers like us. Just some background. I should note that this discussion, excuse me, is more low-level in nature. That is, it is focused on the building blocks of key AWS components. Keep in mind that AWS has far more high-level, more powerful management tools such as OpsWorks, Elastic Beanstalk, CloudFormation, and many others. And I recommend that you explore those on your own time. In the meantime, I strongly believe in understanding what my automation tools are doing for me before I start clicking through and crossing my fingers, if you will. Hoping everybody can hear me well here. Let me turn on the chat room so I know. Sorry, I've just turned on the chat room. Somebody's been trying to get in touch with me. Yeah, I should also note that this is my first Adobe Connect session where I am the presenter. So I see Charlie's going to set me straight on something here in a second. Let's see. So to pick it up. So for example, this is back to getting down and dirty. Things that are done for me, I want to make sure that they are secure enough, where there's enough memory, where the scalability is there. And I want to know for example, what options I have, rather than, like I say, just throwing it out there and let me see what's going on. Excuse me. So I have decided to design this slide deck as more of a tutorial and roadmap, more than a high-level conceptual talk. I do get a lot out of those conversations, but this is just not one of them. It's sort of down in the weeds for CFers like us. All right, get started. Quick note about myself. For what it's worth, I've been working with ColdFusion for almost 20 years. I have a note here. It says, I wonder whether Adobe offers a retirement package for its loyal users, but I don't think so. Last fall, my office was very generous. They sent me to the fire hose, if you will, that was the AWS reInvent conference in Las Vegas. I do recommend it, but it is a fire hose. I do also offer full disclosure. I am not certified in AWS in any way. I have begun that process, but not completed it. So presented here are just the realities that I have experienced in setting up a very simple CF app in AWS. Again, my goal was not to create a nice app, but more just to find out what I was doing and how it all fit together. And in the process, I thought that there were some very tangible lessons, and I wanted to share them. I have found the documentation for AWS to be excellent, but failed to find one video or talk that walked a developer through all the steps succinctly, while being informative and succinct, and not costing significant funds just trying to watch some of these online videos that not free. Okay, so a little bit of Amazon speak to start with. I said this is a beginner to intermediate level course, so I don't want to leave anybody behind. Most importantly, AWS is a platform. Whether you call it a PaaS or whatever the acronym of the day is, it is a platform. Today, we are entering the realm of platform management. This includes a lot of networking security, server configuration, and services configuration concepts. We won't actually get to ColdFusion at the end, but that's not surprising because you already know about ColdFusion. So in the first few slides, we'll talk a little bit about AWS vocabulary. As I said, EC2 to start with is stands for Elastic Computing Generation 2. Many of us have used Parallels on the Mac or Microsoft Virtual PC. By and large, it's the same thing. You do get to pick your size with all its configuration options, memory, hard drive space, endless, whatever you need as far as your virtual machine is, also known as a AMI, Amazon Instance. And of course, there's the concept of auto-scaling, which you are probably well aware, or somewhat aware of at least. It will automatically replicate, depending on how you configure your AWS environment. So very, very powerful feature that lets you sleep well. IAM, I've been around IT for a long time, and this is all I can answer. It's just wow. It's just security, if you will, for permissions, but it is really an access management oligarchy. That's all I can figure out. It controls who, what, when, and how both systems and people can interact. So, for example, when we say who, it includes both people and systems and services that need to access each other. And when we say when, we mean, for example, every other Tuesday between 8 a.m. and 8:05 a.m. and on and on and on. Very, very granular, very useful, and yet with all things that are that granular in nature, it's very important that people get well versed in that subject because it's easy to trip up, as you'll see. Okay. So RDS stands for the Relational Database Services that Amazon provides. You can certainly pick whatever instance you want: MySQL, MariaDB, Postgres, Oracle, SQL Server, including the Express Edition if you're financially inclined to do that, and Amazon Aurora, which is mostly a MySQL implementation. I just note here that the PostgreSQL, which I don't even know how to pronounce, is indeed new to RDS. And of course, note that licensing fees apply in a variety of manners, either as per usage or per year, or you can actually use your own licenses that you have for your own contracts. I love a lot of these concepts, but particularly the database flexibility here, because in the corporate environment, sometimes it's very hard to get support for, or at least approval for, a different port on the firewall to allow you to run a different database management system, which you may also want in your environment. In this case, you don't have to worry about that so much. Excuse me. So simple storage service, S3, figured out math. Just as an example, a few examples, it hosts Netflix, it hosts Dropbox, Pinterest, Tumblr, and lots of other mainstream services. If you're not aware, AWS clearly and definitely hosts quite a bit of very popular large-scale services. I have in my notes here that from the conference that there are over several trillion objects. Now, objects are, for example, files, whether it be audio or video or Word documents, whatever. Over a trillion objects, and that was a few years ago. So, just to give you a taste of what we're talking about as far as scalability for Amazon. Okay, this is a big one. We have 3 areas. This is not IAM. This is not the access management or permissions. This is access management for networking. So you've got security groups, you've got network ACLs, you've got route tables. Mostly these are ingress and egress rules. Most of us knew these at one point in our lives as firewalls. They're defined by protocol, port, and destination source and IP ranges. Now, few important takeaways as you see here are that security groups act as a firewall for instances, that is EC2 instances, controlling both inbound and outbound traffic at the instance level. Network access control lists control subnet access and inbound and outbound traffic. There are other kinds of network traffic controls, including one just for RDS. So just note that this is another area where security is important, and at the same time, it is possible, if not very possible, to get yourself tripped up, either through leaving a hole open or leaving too many doors closed and not being able to do what you need to do. Last but not least, route tables are just that. They actually define where servers should send their packets and which ones they'll accept. So, for example, outgoing packets need to go. Maybe through a gateway, for instance. We'll talk about all this in a few minutes. So, all right. Just to, I'm a little surprised this slide is in this order, but we'll just jump into it. So for examples of all 3 of these, we have, you see there, a security group. You can see it has a screenshot of what you see in the AWS console web interface. You've got the inbound rules shown here, which include, for this group, port 80, port 22, and RDP on 3389. These are default. Ports incoming, you can specify, of course, the source. So if you only want to allow your office's public IP address range to get into these, your AWS network, you can do so there. Just a little note that the 0.0.0.0/0 is a bit unusual for us to talk about because it means everybody. Usually we're specifying things. This in turn just leaves a little wide open. Network ACLs for subnets, and you can see here you can also specify traffic by IP address as well as by port. The route tables are shown on the bottom. These are the traffic controls, and these are a bit different animal. As I was saying before, if you look at the bottom there, it says IGW in blue in the red circle. The IGW stands for Internet Gateway. So a lot of offices, server rooms will have a router that sends all traffic going out, basically looking like to destination servers, making it all look like one IP address. Basically masking it all. And that's what route tables are. They're all about masking and also some control aspect. So I'll stop babbling for now on terminology, and we'll just get into some dive in. I have a note here. I do recommend that you basically put away your notepad for a little bit. This video will be posted later, and we have a lot to cover, so I'll just jump right in. Okay. So these are the areas we're about to cover, as a table of contents, if you will. User accounts, laying the groundwork. This is all, again, towards getting ourselves set up with the ColdFusion environment in the AWS world. We have the marketplace where we'll get the AMI that is supported by Adobe. We have network configurations specific to our needs. We have databases specific to our needs. Code deployment we'll get into just a little bit, mostly by way of screenshots. And then we'll just actually have a quick look at Hello World site that we want to wind up with. Okay, sorry. So AWS accounts. You will, if you haven't done so already, you simply go to the AWS website and create your own account. You'll need to enter a credit card while you're doing it, but otherwise it's just like you would set up an account on any other public website that you can imagine. You're just basically setting up your own username, password, email address, and so forth. But this one does require a credit card that is valid, even though it will not charge directly and immediately any expenses against that. Now, keep in mind, this is the important part. The account that you just created is what you can call as a root account. It will from now on be your root account for all of your AWS needs, including, and most importantly, the billing part. So you're not going to want to use this account to log in very often unless you really want to check your billing statements or set up alerts when your billing reaches a certain threshold, manage those alerts, and so forth. What you will do is you'll then go to the IAM console, part of the console, and follow the steps that they outline there. Most notably, first set the multi-factor authentication on that root account, and then to create a separate administrator account for, if you will, the head geek through IAM. This is a separate account you'll create. You're now the owner of the entire environment, if you will. Just create a user account for either yourself, if you're going to be logging in doing technical work, or anybody else who will be doing significant technical work on your behalf. You'll want to click through and provide this account with both programmatic and console access. It's not worth showing you the screenshots. That's right there in front of you when you get there. And you'll want to store the access key CSV file for this account in safekeeping. Note that some of the old videos and slides don't make note of this, but when you create this account, the CSV file actually automatically downloads to your desktop. So first of all, don't delete your downloads folder without moving this away first. And secondly, you'll want to keep this, as you'll see later. It will be important for us to use and get data that we don't get anywhere else. So one last point on this, which is that the login for your users going forward will be available in the IAM main console page. At the top, it'll say something like your username.signin.aws.amazon.com/console. It may also have just a string. Don't worry, you can customize that to be something more appealing subdomain name that you would like. So just know that you have access to it, and it's also where you find that. Some neat notes here I want to run through. So the MFA point, yeah. One of the options you have for setting up the multi-factor authentication on the root account, again, I highly recommend that, is to choose a virtual MFA device. Basically, all that is saying I want to set it up so that my cell phone, for example, that's what I did, is going to serve as the source for my second factor authentication. Now, it doesn't just send you a text with a 6-digit code. This is actually, in my case, I used Google Authenticator app, and it actually gives me a rotating series of numbers that I can use on my login using that root account. But most importantly, when I initially set it up, it'll prompt you, be alert, it'll prompt you for 2 different instances of the code that your MFA on your cell phone will display. So after that, it will only ask you for 1 set of codes. But when you first set it up, it'll ask you for 2, so just don't get tripped up by that. Looking here, I think that's good enough. Okay. Let's see if we have any notes or comments. Yeah, Patrick, I'll just jump in. We'll talk a little bit more about it in a little bit, but the answer is yes, there are free accounts. They are called free tier accounts. You can look them up or jump on them through the AWS interface. But the bottom line is they are free tier. Tier is the key word. And they are free, as I understand it, entirely for a year for most of the services that are on AWS. Now, as we'll note later, things like proprietary AMIs, like the ColdFusion AMI, those you have to pay for on your own. Now, Adobe does have its own free subscription to its AMI, but that only lasts a month. So, you'll have to keep tabs on your own finances. And as you'll see, an important concept in AWS world is to be careful to tear down when you're done with something. So as you configure something, that's great, that's wonderful, but stop servers, instances that you're not going to be using to minimize any costs that you don't want to incur or don't need to incur. Okay, some groundwork. Before we actually get into launching an AMI, we will get to setting up something called key pairs. The key pairs are available under the EC2 part of the console. I didn't plan on this, but it's kind of silly not to show this. Pardon me 1 second. No. I don't know. I was thinking to show you the user interface, but I'm not comfortable enough with Adobe Connect, if you haven't noticed already, to do that. So I'll leave it to you to play with later. So in the console, just you'll note that there's a main screen with all of all the services that you could possibly want. And if you click on the EC2 link, you'll find a whole navigation bar on the left. And in it, you'll be able to create key pairs as a link. You'll want to name one and save and download the PEM file in a secure place. Simple as that. Not a whole lot of work there. You're just mostly naming something. And it will generate its own secure and public keys and send you a copy for your use coming up. We'll see that when we get to things like remote desktop into your new instance and other places. The required VPC and subnets you'll need to do. I apologize I didn't make screenshots here, but you'll want to note that, for example, I set up the VPC, the virtual private cloud, is just your slice of the AWS network that has its own IP address space separate from anybody else's. So it's, if somebody else has a 10 dot address space, if you will, it's not going to affect you. Don't worry about it. And in fact, if you have multiple VPCs, those 10 dots won't overlap each other. It's just, they're all separate. So it's like having your whole server room duplicated, if you will. Each VPC is like a whole different computer room. So in our computer room, we're going to have, if you will, our VPC. To start with, I recommend something like a 10.0.0.0/16, which is subnet mask for basically something like 6,000 addresses, as I recall. Feel free to take a comment from somebody else. Sorry, look at the notes here. All right, I'll come back to that. The subnet is obviously something within that. Generally speaking, I like to make subnets in increments of 254 addresses. So if I have, let's say, I don't know, an expected range of needing as many as 254 EC2 instances in my public server address space, then that would be, this would be a great place to set up 10.0.1, if you will, .0/24. That /24 is what identifies us as wanting only 254 addresses. We can talk a little bit more about that later, but that's the heart of it. So again, set up your VPC in the console. You also need to set up a subnet within that console and specify the new VPC as its sort of parent, if you will. Let me take a quick look here. Sorry, 65,000 usable IP addresses. Thank you, Will. Looks like Charlie's handling the rest. All right, moving right along. So our ColdFusion EC2 instance. We are at the point where we can start talking about that. We've got our VPC, we've got our IAM configurations, we've got our subnet set up. Now, in all fairness, you can do some of that right through the marketplace interface itself, but I chose not to do that through those automated clicks. I'd rather set up those subnets and VPCs myself ahead of time so I know what it is I'm getting. So in the marketplace, you see the URL there. Just search for ColdFusion. Pick the OS you want. If you search for ColdFusion 2016, you're going to see two options. One is Linux and one is Windows. As I said earlier, the CFMeetup is free for a month. As far as a subscription is concerned. So feel free to select that, but be careful in the one-click launch screen, which I use, and I don't see any reason why not to, at least for getting started purposes. Be careful with the selection of instance type. The M3.medium hourly option was the cheapest of the hourly options. But that's not what it jumps to by default. It wants to go into a much more expensive option. So looking at my notes here, I see yes. So the software running on the server, which includes Windows Server and ColdFusion. That's 24 cents an hour. Sounds reasonable. And then, of course, the instance, the AMI instance, just running an EC2 instance, excuse me, itself of this size and shape is 13 cents an hour. So that's, got that right? Sorry, I'm not doing my math right. 11 cents and 13 cents adds up to 24 cents an hour, but that turns out to be $2,000 a year. Something to throw to your CFO and start to make some rough estimates based on that. I have a note here. This does not include I/O-based fees, that is input-output-based fees, such as you'll see in databases and S3 storage. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So it's not as simple as I've just made it up to be. I'll just jump back to the slide and we'll talk a little bit more about the money later, but note that's a whole different ball of wax. So in your one-click launch, you'll really want to make sure you pick both the M3 Medium and the default Northern Virginia for most of us. I noted that in one case, it jumped me out to Oregon, I think it was. So be careful that you get the right region. And then I let CFAMI do the setup of security group defaults. That's the one exception to my rule, because that's where ColdFusion and Adobe, which created this AMI, would be most well informed as to what the instance is going to need. Okay. Oh, very good. Will, coming through again. Very nice calculator there. Very good. If anybody's not keeping track of the comment stream there, it's got some good links. Okay. Moving along. So where we are at this point, let's take a deep breath. Again, I apologize and thank you for your patience as I'm still new to this presenter mode. But we have now an EC2 instance. It is based on the 2016 ColdFusion AMI, running in the AWS cloud. It is in a virtual private network, virtual private cloud network, if you will. It's in a subnet, but we don't have a public IP address to it yet. So let's go ahead and talk about that for just a second. In creating our networking environment, we need three major pieces. One is the Internet Gateway, and that will then be attached to a VPC. Not a whole lot of configuration there. You simply click on VPC in the console's main page, and under that you'll be able to navigate on the left down to Internet Gateways, click on Internet Gateway, and click to create one, give it a name, and you're done. Right? Tags are useful. I won't go into them here and now, but they are useful, and in some cases actually necessary. So, and they don't cost anything. So use liberally if you have a methodology to that. All right, so then we have an Internet Gateway. We attach it, as you see here, to a particular VPC. In this case, it's the only one we have. Then we create an elastic IP. So again, we go back to our navigation on the left. We choose elastic IP, and again, we're going to, at this time, associate it with the NIC of our EC2 instance, the network interface card. And these are all sort of virtual concepts, but the bottom line is, you click on the elastic IP address option, you can create one. It'll give you a public IP address. It calls an elastic IP address. That's essentially our public IP address. You can then go to either Route 53 or GoDaddy or whatever you want for making your domain name point to this IP address, or you can just type in, as we'll use in a few minutes, just type in that IP address in your browser and your web page should come up just fine. So that's going to be your public IP address. The custom route table, we saw a little bit of this earlier. Again, you're going to want to see that last line at the bottom there. You want to make sure that your route table does tell your subnet and any components therein to go when it's sending packets back out to the cloud, that it should send it through the internet gateway. So, for example, if a user requests a page from your server in this subnet, the server may get the request, but it won't know how to send it out unless the route table actually specifies to send it through the IGW. So just keep that in mind. How are we doing over here? It's 12:37. Okay. Anyone else can chime in on what? Bill, support plans from who?
The outstanding question is the third one from the bottom. Well, the fourth and fifth ones from the bottom. Phil asking about AWS support pricing from Amazon.
Oh, very good. Yeah, I see JG has some money issues. Yeah, I have not looked into that. I mean, actively. I passingly recall something about support, but I don't have something for you. As you'll see, and as much as I'm going to sit here and talk, there's going to be a lot to this AWS puzzle that I will not be covering. And it's dialogues like this that will help us get through to success. So just step back for a second. I know this is kind of jargony and complicated, but if you can bear with me. In the upper left corner, we have kind of a conceptual tree here. At top level, in AWS, you have regions. There are regions all across the globe. Last checked, I think there are 16 different regions in Saigon and Ireland, all kinds of places. Scratch that. Saigon probably isn't one of them. But certainly in South America, in Europe, lots of different places. So in each of those regions, and of course there are at least 4 or 5 in the U.S., Northwest and California and so forth. Within each region, you'll have a virtual private cloud that you create. That's what we talked about earlier, and that's optional. But within each VPC, you can maintain a route table, and of course you can have availability zones. Now, it's a little bit convoluted because your regions have the availability zones. That's straight out of the box Amazon. However, your VPC will likely traverse multiple availability zones. So in your region, you can think of a availability zone as actually a campus. So a campus of servers, not just a computer room, but an actual campus of computers. And so in Northern Virginia, they have 3 availability zones within that one region. So backing it back out now, we see that, as you see by the diagram and by our depiction in the left corner, you make the VPC, and the VPC can and probably should traverse multiple availability zones within that region. I'm hoping that was less unclear than it was clear. Oh, I didn't read. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, no, that I didn't answer it correctly. Phil, I didn't answer correctly. I thought you meant Adobe support. Yeah, again, Amazon, I also don't have a whole lot of experience with their support offerings. Okay, so back to the slide deck, we have, most importantly, so we covered the one big point, which is your VPC will often traverse multiple availability zones within a region. Then note what is an attempt to have the indefinite symbol next to both availability zones and subnets. So you can have lots of availability zones covered, but you can also have multiple subnets within your VPC, and that doesn't have any limits that I know of. So with that, just a little box on the lower left-hand corner of examples of, here, this is the answer that Phil gave us earlier. The total number of hosts on a /16 subnet mask is 65,536, not the 6,000 I had mentioned earlier. And then the diagram on the right, I will not drag you through it. It is a depiction of attempts. It's actually from the Adobe document, sorry, the AWS documentation, and I thought it did a good, if not too thorough, way of outlining what the networking basics might look like for us. Okay, a few quirks before I think we can move on to getting out of the concepts of networking. One is the VPC. You can't change the size of a VPC after you create it. I'll just leave it at that. You can research it more, but the bottom line is we did the /16 subnet mask. That gave us 65,000 IP addresses, and then we can subnet that however we like. But at least then you've got your VPC basics set up the way you want it, so you don't lock yourself in too tight to begin with. Limited range of IP addresses. The allowed block size is between a subnet of 28 and 16. If you create more than one subnet within a VPC, the CIDR blocks, if you will, the subnet mask blocks, count overlap. So you kind of have to manage it. Just like your networking guy at your office has to do right now, there has to be some budgeting, if you will, of IP address spaces to best meet your growth needs and your immediate needs of your 65,000 IP addresses, if you will. And then lastly, as we're going to see in a little bit, to a certain degree, S3, just to make sure I don't miss it, S3, again, is the storage feature that they have. The main element of their storage is called buckets. It's the, if you will, the root folder of an S3 subscription, if you will. The root folder, these buckets, are DNS unique across all of AWS. So when you type one in and you try to create a new bucket, you may very well get a that's already taken message. You cannot create duplicate message. So just keep that in mind. It's not just you who are competing for that bucket name. It actually becomes a sub-domain name for accessing that bucket. So it comes under the tree. Yeah, Will, I debated on the question of putting in a more quiet, subtle diagram than I used, but I chose to go with one that was a little more complicated because I thought it was more complete, and I knew this was being recorded and available later on. I do see Charlie concerned about time, and I am as well. Let's do a quick look over here. Yeah. Yep. Valid concern. I'll take it up a notch and maybe jump through some things a little more quickly. Certainly the rest is less new material than the other stuff has. So take that for what it's worth. RDP. We will RDP in, if you will, not today, but when you walk through these steps on your own, you'll want to remote desktop in to your instance, whether you're using Linux or Windows. Obviously, in the case of RDP, I'm using Windows, but in either case, the end result is that you will need to log into that instance remotely and finish the ColdFusion installation. So that's where you'll fill in all of the, well, it's not worth talking. We all know what the ColdFusion install process looks like, the windows that come up with the wizard. You have to walk through that at some point, and that's where RDP comes in. And it comes up automatically as soon as you open the window. The only thing I want to note here is that when you go to your EC2 instances, you can click on one and say connect, and if it's a Windows instance, it'll come up with this screenshot you see on the right. The connect option will ask you for that key pair file that we talked about earlier. You'll throw it in here, and it will decrypt the password for the administrator account on the Windows instance, which of course you can log in and change later, but at least you'll get the beginning administrator password through this process. How are we going to access our database? So first of all, we'll have to create one. Real quick, you can go into the console, you can go to the RDS console, which is right off of the main console screen. You'll create an instance. I chose SQL Express. You'll want to create a database subnet group. Don't get confused, but that's okay. It's pretty straightforward as it is. It's not as complicated as the other ones. And you'll want to, most importantly, grab that endpoint URL that we see in the screenshot below. It's kind of nice the way they have the UI. If you mouse over it, it'll actually basically try to kind of copy and paste it for you, or copy it into your memory for you. So you'll grab the endpoint URL and you'll plug that into your ColdFusion CFIDE for your data source. Simple as that. I have some notes here. So an obvious point that I always concerned myself with was, okay, now how do I get to the database as far as running my DDL, configuring the database structure? Obviously, a couple of ways to do that. One is to open up a port directly from your machine to the database instance, which you can do, and fire up your favorite SQL client and go do your work. You can also actually run your DDL in a CFML script, and we can look at code deploy later on how that might play out. But however you want, just for what it's worth, just to illustrate how simple it can be, I chose to install SQL Server Management Studio right on my front-end server just for this demo. So it can be very, very simple. Take a quick look. Okay, Abdul, noted. Yeah, noted. Yeah. Okay, code deploy. Okay. Some keywords in the world of code deploy. Jumping right into it, we have the application name. Code deploy being what you might want to use to take your code and automatically, if you will, plug it into your EC2 instance and have it update your application for you. There are two major ways of doing that. One is putting your code in a S3 bucket and having code deploy take it from there, or you can put it in GitHub and have it get it from there. There are a couple other options, but those are the two main ways. Very nice though, and we can look at that in just a second. So the application name is what you'll call this code deploy world, if you will. We'll give it a deployment group name, and then we'll create an actual deployment revision. So I'm seeing a lot of concerns about time and of talking too much, so I'll try to jump to the chase. Keep in mind, if you will, that the code configuration file that you'll want to have in your, for example, your repository, in the base root of your repository is called an app spec, and it can be either YAML or JSON. In this case, you'll probably want to go with YAML. It's a lot easier to read on the eyes. But the bottom line is that's what's going to configure how CodeDeploy takes your code and puts it into your servers, and including any hooks or scripts that you want to write, or sorry, run either before, during, or after your code is deployed. So if you want your EC2 instance to restart, whatever it is you want to do, you can actually specify that right in the YAML file, and you can actually either write that code in the YAML file as a string, or you can reference an external file in your repository. So to actually do it, you'll want to create your IAM role for CodeDeploy. And this is important to note, the CodeDeploy agent, when creating an AMI, you'll need to create a launch configuration. That's going too fast. Important note really is that in order for CodeDeploy to work, the agent itself needs to be on all of your EC2 instances that you want to do it. It's not a push methodology, it's actually a pull. So your AMI itself will cycle through and go get the latest code revision that you want to give it. So again, some demo would have been very useful, I understand that, but the long story short is that this is a long story short. So I apologize, but at the same time, it really does have a lot of behind it.
So in that regard, Pete, I had asked in the chat, but I don't know if you saw it, would you maybe want to do a part 2 and continue where you are and maybe plan in that one to do more demos? It's totally cool if you want to.
Certainly. Certainly. In fact, this is a problem.
So I was suggesting that if you want to try to just bound this in this next few minutes, or you can go 5 or 10 longer if you want, but just let people know your thoughts as you get there. And I'm just saying, I'm happy to have you even next week. We've got next Thursday open if you want to just jump into that slot.
Yeah, I heard that invitation at the beginning. Yeah, thanks for the invite back. Yeah, I'll be happy to come back and think. I think CodeDeploy is in and of itself worthy of significant discussion. And yes, Will is completely right. AWS training is literally hundreds of hours. So yes, Charlie, I'll take you up on the invitation. Thank you so very much. I will just jump through a few more things, if I may. Pardon the screen jumps while I do it. Yeah, the pip, curl, Python CLI, all that we'll talk about next time. If you are planning to come back, grab this URL. Charlie, I'm not sure how best to do this other than leave it on the screen, but this YouTube video from a guy named Andrew, I didn't get his last name, really was excellent on this whole CodeDeploy concept.
Pete, if you could grab that URL from your screen right now, just right click, depending on how that slide thing works, if you can right click on it and say copy link.
Right.
Or if you can't, if you just back up and just copy it, with your mouse and paste it into the chat pod, that link will become linkable to everybody in the chat pod. And you can do that, of course, with any of those URLs if you want to.
That doesn't look right. Oh, Larry beat me to it. Thanks, Larry. All right, I think it's an invitation to keep going. All right, so CodeDeploy. All right. Just a visual real quick. You can, of course, specify, let's jump to the bottom two boxes there. Repository name, obvious. You want to specify in GitHub what your repository, your username and repository names are with the slash, and then your commit ID that you want to deploy in that particular revision. Simple enough. Those are your two major points in deploying. You could deploy. Final notes. Make sure you're logged in to the correct region. Literally, you can be logged in and you're not in the right region, and things will look completely different. So make sure that upper right-hand corner says, in this case, it says Oregon, rather than here in Northern Virginia. So again, make sure you're in the right region. Make sure that your privileges and keys are appropriate. And don't forget to do your teardowns and stops. There's a difference between a stop and a terminate. A terminate of an EC2 instance destroys it. A stop will do just that, which is to stop the instance from running. A little bit on this. No, I think we covered this. All right. That's all I've got for today. I think the way to go, Charlie, is for you and I to chat a little bit offline. Excuse me. Thanks, Phil. And maybe next week is good. Maybe not. Let me talk to my boss too. So thank you all very much for joining me and for helping me learn how to use
Connect. Well, thank you, sir. And again, good on you for ending right on the money. We still got 2 minutes early, so that's great. And yes, we can sort out, what that topic. By the way, I don't know if you caught there's a lot of chat and you can't keep up with it all. I totally understand. But some folks were saying they'd love to see more on code deploy, and some folks were saying they'd love to see more of a, 0 to 60 starting from scratch. And I just wondered if you might, in the next one, maybe in the first half of that one, do a 0 to 60 start to finish setting things up, and then maybe in the last half do a live code deploy. That might be a good balance. And if, as I said, if you want to do a part 3, if there's more that you want to show, that's certainly welcome.
I think that's excellent. The 0 to 60 concept speaks to me, yeah.
And then Larry was pointing out that you might also want to consider putting in to do some sort of a session at one of the upcoming conferences, like he said CF Summit and NC DevCon, because I do believe that CF Objectives call for speakers is closed. But yep.
Right. Oh, that's quite a vote of confidence. So thank you. I'll look into that.
And Will, you're right. This even a 0 to 60 could take more than an hour. This is a subject that one really has to be careful to think about what to and what not to cover, because it could just go on for hours.
Well,
so
let me ask Will, or anybody out there, what does 0 to 60 look like to you as far as time-wise? I mean, clearly we can chop out a lot of the networking stuff. Okay, well, good.
And Will, of course, if you'd like to do a talk and cover things from a perspective that you think might be different, we certainly can do that. And in fact, let me just throw out there, for everybody's sake, that at Into the Box, which happened about a week and a half ago, Pete's colleague Brian Klaas did also a talk on Amazon, and he's done it at other conferences before, and I look forward to having it on, and we planned on doing it, but it's going to be a couple months before he's able to get on. He's got some stuff coming up, so we'll have another one. But just to say, beyond what Pete plans, Will, if you want to do another, you're certainly welcome. And Abdul, if you want to do one on Azure, you're certainly welcome.
Chris, what do you mean by that? There are lots of online tutorials. Do you like? You want us to recommend one? Lots of videos out there. My
Sure.
original point was there's lots of stuff out there. I was trying to pick and choose what I thought it was an attempt at a 0 to 60. But now that I look back, we can do better.
Sure. And you learn each time you do one. And everybody's got different opinions. I mean, you may do one that you think is a great 0 to 60, and as you see, somebody says, I want more demos. Somebody else says, I want more concepts. I want more gotchas and tips and tricks. It's just hard. It's really hard.
Right.
Will, since you do so much, do you have stuff at your blog that you might want to recommend people look at? It's trunkful.com, isn't it?
Yeah, I like a Cloud Guru as well. That was good stuff.
But certainly if others know of great resources that they want to share, we can stick around for a few minutes so you can type those in to the chat. And all this is being recorded, even the chat. So for those who may go, oh crap, I missed a link or something, his presentation is going to be there. The chat will be there. Yeah, and then there's still that outstanding question of Phil's about support.
Yeah. Phil, I don't know about you, but I never have any issues.
And that's something to note as you watch resources. You'll find some people never mention such a thing because they're writing a talk or they're doing a video or they're writing a blog post because they are the self-sufficient sort who sorted through it all and got it working on their own, and they're sharing their experience, and they're going, why would you pay for support? You just figure it out. But there's other people who work in environments where they need to have support. They need vendor support, or they know pragmatically they don't want to be digging through stuff. They'd rather just call somebody and say, hey, how much will it cost for you to fix this for me? And I would suspect that you'll find AWS does have such people. And if not Amazon employees, they're probably an army of consultants who've been certified. I suppose that's part of the main reason for getting the certification. To be able to make that money doing that consulting.
Yeah, Chris, I see your point about Lucy. I tried a little bit of attempt to get Lucy going, but I don't know why I got overwhelmed or derailed, but I mean, there are just so many. Let me get back to the other point. There are so many features, and there are literally one of the notes I had is there are literally thousands of features. I think even every month from Amazon on this system. Now, feature isn't a whole app, but it's just little. They're significant, and it's a moving target. So. When an organization tries to do so many things for so many people, the moving target becomes a problem for folks like us, where it may be possible to set it up, but when we want to change things or take training on something, it's hard to discern which trainings are current, which ones aren't, and so forth. So a contract of some sort might be. Yeah, we saw that, Phil. That was Brian talks about that. It was February. It wasn't all of Amazon. It was just the main one here in Northern Virginia. They had a complete outage for 13 hours or more. It was really, really horrible. I know at Hopkins we had a problem. U.S. East. Thanks, Will. Well, before everybody leaves, I just want to say thank you to Charlie as well for working with me on this. It's been
Sure. And again, thank you, sir, for coming on, and we'll look forward to getting set up for a subsequent one. And if it's no problem if it can't be next week, we'll make it some subsequent week.
great.
And thanks, everybody, for your kind remarks. And I'll say that I'll stop the recording shortly. We'll give a moment to see if there's anything else that comes up. But if things start to quiet down, I'll stop the recording because there may be somebody waiting to ask a question who doesn't want it to be recorded, doesn't want their name connected to it and online for the world to see. By the way, earlier, Phil, you shared the link to the meetup room itself. I didn't. Maybe you didn't mean to. Maybe that was a mistake. You had it in your clipboard, and that's the only reason that you pasted it. No problem. Thanks. Just wanted to make sure. And while we're here waiting for things to settle down, I'll throw out that back towards the beginning of the session, somebody was asking about enabling their own mic so that they, as an attendee, could speak up. And I'll just say that that's like herding cats. We've never done that. This is the 249th session, and I would not want to try, because not only is it difficult often to get your audio working, as we went through that with Pete, and I go through it with a lot of people, there's all kinds of issues that can stumble for the first couple minutes, and we wouldn't want to have to deal with that. But then, I'd have to be somehow letting people in and then shutting people down to not have you step on each other. It just wouldn't really work well. This just isn't. I don't think this is a good venue for that.
Yeah.
Some other.
For what's worth, Charlie, when you talk to Brian, ask him about his IOL sessions. Hopkins, what we do is all online education, and so he actually has a class to basically, it's a required class for all the students coming in to say, this is how you use your computer, audio, video, this is what you need, and it's just an amazing process. He has to do probably once every month, I think. It's really it's phenomenal how basic he needs to make it. Really.
Oh, yes. Yes. Right. Yeah. So, I've wondered over the years about having some sort of a separate kind of session that is more like that, but it's just tough. You'd really have to meet everybody in advance, make sure their audio is working, and then have a way to easily let them in and let them out. And there's other venues that maybe are better. Somebody ought to maybe do a Google Hangout if you like that. And just as a reminder, we use Adobe Connect because Adobe does provide it, and obviously there's other solutions out there, but A, it's kind of then provided, B, they let us keep the recordings of all the sessions. So we've got sessions going back 10 years. And if you go to that recordings.coldfusionmeetup.com, you'll see that's a catalog of them. Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, no, I just noticed something in my comments. I see 22 people all online, so I'll just throw it out there. One of the fun things I like about this is that I did everything on my Chromebook. I didn't need a Windows client. I didn't need anything. The only thing I didn't do on my Chromebook is this. Adobe Connect.
And we should throw out it's Flash-based, which, for some people they'd go, oh, well, that's the problem with that stinky old thing. But it still works for most people. And someday it's probably going to be a challenge.
It works on the Chromebook. It just doesn't work with all the bells and whistles. I think being a presenter.
Yeah. And by the way, Pete, I'll say, I know we're still recording, and that's just in case anybody had any follow-up questions, but I'll just say, Pete, we can get together again maybe before the next one, and whatever those challenges were you felt that were still complicating some things, we'll get them sorted out so you're 100% comfortable showing whatever you want, whenever you want. All right, well, it looks like the questions have kind of petered out there, so let me go ahead and stop the recording in case anybody's waiting to ask one off the recording. So again, thank you, Pete, and we'll get news out to his part 2 sometime in the future.